he's gotten rid of all possible doubt. And so he starts off in the meditations talking about things like wax and things where, when you make wax warm, you can change the shape, then it cools off and it's hard. So what's the real shape of the wax? Well, it depends, right? It's not something you know for sure. And what about dreams? How many of you have had a dream ever? Everyone has had a dream. While you were in the dream, did it seem real to you? Yeah, if it's an Albtraum or a bad dream, yeah, they're pretty scary, right? What was my latest bad dream? I forget. Probably dreaming that I would come into class and I would want to say something and I wouldn't be able to remember it. No, wait, that's not a bad dream. That really happened. Oh, okay. Well, so the problem you might have is, how do you know when a dream... No, a dream is never real. How do you know it's not real when you're having the dream? Well, you could go into that, and he does. And as a result, he's convinced that there's no way that you can tell for sure between what we call real life and a dream. How do you know? This could be a dream. In fact, there's a famous movie that uses this same plot as the whole point of the movie. It's called The Matrix. Everybody's familiar with The Matrix, right? Everybody thinks they're in real life, when in fact they're all lying in vats of Jell-O, and they're parts of a battery that's running these AI computers, I guess, or alien computers, whatever, right? And how do they know? The only way they know is if someone actually wakes them up and they wake up out of the...
Whenever I have a dream, I just it feels real, but I know in the back of my head that I'm still sleeping. I don't know, at that point, I do whatever I want.
Like lucid dreaming?
Mm-hmm.
Like lucid dreaming?
Yeah.
Are you able to control what goes on in your dreams?
Sometimes. In fact, if I think about something for a while before I go to sleep, I'll dreaming about it.
What are those dreams called where, you see yourself, but you can't move and you're
Bad dreams.
Sleep paralysis?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
That's good. I don't think I have sleep paralysis.
Yeah. No, I have my own sleep paralysis. Yeah.
I talk to the characters in my dreams, and that's how I know it wasn't real. So I can kind of make my own story. Decide what I want to do. See what I want to see.
Like lucid dreaming?
Yeah.
So, but he's got his doubts. He can't prove that this is real, as far as he's concerned. So he hypothesizes a worst case scenario, and this is where an evil mind is creating everything like the Matrix and fooling you into thinking that it's all real, and it's really not. And so at that point, Descartes has reached kind of the bottom, because how do you know anything? And that's when he realizes that, well, even at that point, he knows one thing for sure, that he's thinking. And therefore, he exists as a res cogitans, a thinking thing. Now, that doesn't enable him to think, and I have a body, etc., etc., etc. Caleb?
It's like Lovecraft, where all
H.P.
the
Lovecraft?
monsters have to they're dreaming, and they create the reality through their dreams. But if all of them stop dreaming at the same time, everything
Oh shoot.
stops
Yeah.
existing.
Yeah.
Right.
Stephen King and his turtles.
Well, Bertrand Russell said it's turtles. Actually, it was an old lady that said to Bertrand Russell, you know, everything's on a turtle. And he said, uh-huh. And what's the turtle on? And she said, another turtle. And he said, uh-huh. And he was going to push the point. She said, don't get that way with me, Sonny. It's turtles all the way down.
I'm just like imagining a stack of turtles. I want one. I want a stack of turtles.
I've never seen more than 2 turtles on it, you know.
On top
Yeah,
of each other.
you know, that's kind of interesting.
Like a loaf of bread, but turtles.
It's not my fault. This is true. Well, so he feels like he's reached the actual ground on which he now has certainty. He cannot doubt that he's the one that's having the doubts, because who's having the doubts? So therefore, a thinking thing, and he's not going to go on and say that he has a body, but at this point he at least knows that thought exists. He exists as a thinking thing, a res cogitans. Now, he goes on to his version of an ontological argument. And at this point, he argues he has the conception of an infinite, powerful, all-powerful, all-good God. And it occurs to him that since the cause must be greater than the effect, anytime there is such an effect, the cause is always greater than the effect. That the cause of his having an idea of a perfect, infinite God, considering he's a finite being that has doubts, could only have been there because of God putting it there. You see how that's kind of a version of the ontological argument? The ontological argument is that God is that in which nothing greater can be thought. And as a result of that definition, God must exist. Because otherwise, something else could be greater than God because it exists as well as being in the mind, right? And so therefore, God must also exist, or that other thing would be greater than God, but by definition, God is that in which nothing greater can be thought. So therefore, God must exist, right? His version of this ontological argument is that I could not have put this idea of a perfect God in my own mind because I'm not capable of it. So therefore, there must actually be a God that created that idea. And he goes on further to point out that God, being all good, wouldn't mislead me into thinking that the things that I really think are real are not real. And so therefore, he takes that leap and says, so therefore I know that the things that are clear and distinct are real. So clear and distinct, that's his, you can come in and have a seat if you like. So clear and distinct is the main thing for him. And now we end up with an interesting aspect to this whole plan. Because what is he going to try to show is clear and distinct? Mathematics. That's the only thing that works out to be really clear and distinct for Descartes, is mathematics. And why is that significant? Notice that if you're a member of the church, what you have to believe is what the church tells you. What Descartes is arguing is no, the only thing you actually have to, that you can know for sure is what's clear and distinct, and what's clear and distinct is mathematics, not religious dogma. And so we in a sense, see this being a real revolutionary point in the scientific development of our thinking, right? keep in mind too that a contemporary of Descartes, a little older, is Galileo. We didn't really talk very much about him, but I did mention that Galileo builds his own telescope, builds lots of other machines as well. He does testing on rolling balls down a plane. Apparently also dropped weights off of a tower in Pisa, which is famous still today because, you know, it's perfect for that because it leans. So you can lean on the one side and drop your weights and say, look out below. And in fact, we have a really neat proof. Where is it? Let me just do the cheap thing and say, hopefully I can get the, yes.
This is NASA's Space Power Facility near Cleveland, Ohio, and it is the world's biggest vacuum chamber. It's used to test spacecraft in the conditions of outer space. And it does that by pumping out 30 tons of air in this chamber until there are about 2 grams left. There's got an eccentric construction, which is part of its history. It was built in the 1960s as a
I should.
dropped at the same time.
So this is before it's a vacuum. Feathers and ball. But now
In
when
this
they
case, the feathers
empty.
fell to the ground at a slower rate than the bowling ball because of air resistance. So, in order to see complete, there's a near perfect vacuum inside.
60.4 station one, go for drop. TCP 30-1, pressure set 140 psi. We are go for drop. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1, release.
Now, why did they slow motion the thing? That totally ruins it.
It's great for dramatic effect.
Yeah, but it screws up the whole.
Right? Wasn't there like beautiful music in the background?
Yeah.
It's like revolutionary.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Changing lives here.
And I've got this. You get the idea. So they've tested it.
There's no way that you're telling me that a feather fell at the same time that the bowling ball did?
Exactly the same.
That's what this was supposed to demonstrate.
That's just
They were really heavy feathers.
the ball and the feather fall because there's a force pulling them down.
That's wild.
But Einstein imagined the scene very differently. The happiest thought of his
Well, you get the idea. So this was a thought experiment that Galileo had, that air was causing the difference, and that if there was no air, you would have that effect. Of course, Galileo couldn't make that kind of a test. But Galileo created lots of interesting machines and apparently was inspired to think about gravity and the way, well, they didn't call it gravity. Gravity just meant heaviness. even though he does a lot of the experiments and measuring and so on, Sir Isaac Newton is the one that gets the credit for actually inventing gravity and giving us the formulas and so on. But Descartes is doing physics and applying it not only to the physical, ground of where he is in Pisa, and he's arguing with Aristotle. Aristotle is the one who says that the heavier object falls faster than the lighter object, which, if you're talking about, feathers and a bowling ball, that would be right. But why? And